What's up, agents, and welcome back to another division video. We've got a big important event coming up on the 11th. That's right, we've got a brand new incursion launching. That's right, Broken Rain is coming very soon, and I thought I would post a video on the builds that I've got set up ready to take in, and also give you the stats for them as well, just in case you want to build the same ones. Don't forget to like, share, comment and subscribe. Let's get straight into it. So we're going to start off with our DPS builds, and there's two real DPS builds that I'm going to take in. They're going to be fairly obvious, I would guess, and I'll kind of change things around on the fly as I need to. But the first one is going to be strikers. Now, at the moment, we don't know for sure. They said it was still up in the air, and we've not had any patch notes or anything yet. But they did mention that they don't know if prototype is going to work or not in the incursion. They've not yet confirmed that. But I'm kind of leaning on the side that it won't. Prototype doesn't work in the incursion that we've got now. I don't really see the fact that they would change it. But either way, I have got both builds. I understand that you might not. But if these would be the builds that I would use regardless of them being prototype or not, is what I'm trying to say. And what would happen is this will go back down to 15%. If I took my prototype build in, it normalizes it back to the max stats of the gear set or the high end before it was prototyped. But this is what essentially I would take in. Usual rules apply. Get as close to 60% critical hit damage as you can and put everything else into critical hit damage. I'm not going to worry too much about taking in any kind of survivability or anything like that as of yet. Okay, I might end up switching that out and putting that fancy prima donna on as my secondary because it does protect us from taking damage in certain situations. That might come in handy. I'm going to be taking things like that with me. But essentially, I'm going to go all out because we're going to go in as a foursome and we'll probably take a dedicated healer. And therefore, me building in survivability into myself shouldn't really be needed. We need to do as much damage as we possibly can. So that is my ethos. That is what I'm going to show you. I'm going to show you my two DPS builds, and then I'm going to show you my tank build. And then even though I don't play it myself, I will show you an example healer build as well that you'll be able to put together and take in. But yeah, nothing out of the ordinary here. What I potentially would do is maybe swap out the striker's chest piece for an equalizer if it found out that I weren't really getting up to stacks. But this is hard content. I'm very much expecting to be getting up to top stacks. But yeah, 4 strikers pieces, including chest and backpack, contractor's gloves, and then the unit alloys holster. That is going to be my first one. Skills will be whatever I need. Decoy is my go-to, but I'll change it to a Banshee Pulse potentially or something like that. If you wanted to see the stats for this on my DPS calculator, all the links will be down below, but I'll show you now. So here are the stats for it. Obviously, you don't have to use the gear shift if you don't want to, but everything is kind of filled in with my prototype stats. But like I said to you at the beginning, it wouldn't matter. I would use a high-end or prototype exactly the same pieces. A little bit of a spoiler here, but it's not quite as bad as what it looks. The strikers build is the red one. I have got back and forth on there as well. I can take that off if I wish, but as you can see, I do use back and forth, so I kind of want to see what I'm going to be getting. All right, so moving on to the next build. And that is going to be my Tipping Scales Frenzy Tinkerer. And the reason I'm taking the Tinkerer into this rather than kind of Frenzy or something else is that the Tinkerer offers us a huge amount of burst DPS. I will potentially end up changing this gun from Streamline to potentially Ranger, which will be here on my MG5. And the reason is I feel like we will stick back a little bit more when it's unknown territory, and it might end up being a bit more useful. And also I might go down a lot. Streamline's not going to work too well there if my revive hive is on cooldown, so it just makes more sense to potentially take Ranger in or Unhinged or something like that. So this is how we're going to show you the build. The same rules apply. You're just going to get as close to 60% critical hit chance and then critical hit damage along the way. Doesn't matter if it's prototype or not, you're just going to need to pick yourself up a tinkerer. My go-to for this is going to be the GR9. This build is really all about burst damage. When it gets going, it will do insane amounts of burst damage, because frenzy and then also being able to put the damage from ranger on top of it is absolutely insane. Crit chance, crit damage across the board, as you can see here. Crit, double crit damage on this. Crit chance, crit damage on that. Crit chance on that. My holster. And crit chance on this. 57.4 crit chance, 139% critical hit damage. All very nice. And just be aware that what I'm showing you here does not include the global modifiers. If you want to take a look at that on the damage spreadsheet, my DJTICKLE.com build calculator, that's old school. Again, I will post a link for this down below, but as you can see, GR9, all of the stats we've just gone through are all plumbed in. Let me just check that magazine size. Magazine size is 325. That's for if I had global modifiers on. So let's just make a quick change to that. I thought it looked a bit out of whack, and the RPM should be 844. That's as if global modifiers was on, so that's good that we noticed that. And as you can see here, tipping scales, chest and backpack, frenzy and ranger. Now it is assuming that ranger is at a pretty good distance. It's at 24 meters, because we can't really adjust for that. Maybe I could make a slider for ranger in this in the future. We've got 9.6% echo on this. But as you can see, it beats out the sustained DPS and the burst DPS by quite a bit. Obviously, we're not using back and forth on this either. But as you can see, the whole thing is that tipping scales works and seems to be a lot better. But what you got to remember is there's a few things going on here as well. It's not quite as nice as day as the damage calculator shows out. Frenzy generally sometimes is not up all of the time. And if I take frenzy off, you can see how much closer in damage they actually become. So then that parts of the fight where you don't have frenzy, you'll be doing very similar damage. And then on the parts of the fights where you do have frenzy, you'll be doing significantly more. But that's not always straightforward. We know frenzy is a very certain type of play. You've got to run the mag all the way down to the end, and that just doesn't always fit in certain scenarios unless you know some of these scenarios very well. So that's the build that I'm going to be taking in, and again I will put the link for this down below. Next up, let's move on to my tank build. Now this is the tank build that I've used for a very long time. I used to use it in Iron Horse for the last fight. And there's a certain reason why I'm not running the Pointman here. And that's quite simply because I wanted the extra armor regen just to make my life easier. And I kind of like it that way. But if you want to swap out my chest piece, you can see here, I've got health, armor regen, protection from elites on here. I would much rather that be Has-Pro rather than health. But not everything's perfect. But I am running Vanguard, as you can see here. On the knees, I'm running the Emperor's Guard for the armor regen. Now, this is weapon damage here at the moment, and that's because I use these in a different build. So let's just get that changed back to armor so they look exactly how they should be. And then for the rest of it, we're just going to run the Foundry Bulwark with armor regen absolutely everywhere. Now, this could be Has-Pro, and obviously, as you can see here, these pieces are set up specifically so that I can change them on the fly wherever I am. So maybe I'll need to fill this up with Has-Pro rather than the armor regen. But of course as well, the other mod slots are filled with protection from elite mods, again, just because that is my safe go-to scenario. But this is the build that I will take in. The reason the Ravenous is on there is because I can generate bonus armor. But again, they're quite easily hot swapped to whatever we end up might needing in any given situation. potentially we might need to use a mosquito or something like that with our shield. And then last but not least, I would probably not want to play this build. I'm not a healer, but this is my suggestions on what I would take in. It's on my other character, so I don't often play this. Well, I never play this. But starting off with guns, something with sledgehammer on, just to help your team do a little bit more damage if they need to. Then you've got the lullaby, where you can just take out an enemy that is being a little bit annoying if you need to. Otherwise, here I would run the Scorpio. It's always, again, a nice debuff slash buff for your team's damage. And then obviously as well, we have got the mosquito, which you've got to be very, very careful with, but again, will help you and your team do more damage. Then we're going to go for another few variety of options here. We've got the Birdie's backpack. That is again something that I would use in a new scenario. You can obviously pick people up very, very quickly, which comes in, you know, pretty handy. We then have a setup that we can put in with skill tier, because then that gives us perfectly opportunistic, again buffing our team, helping them do more damage. Gloves wise, we're just going to use the BTSU data gloves or future initiative. But then the new one that was from just last season, I believe, we have got a chest piece here, the named one, the benefactor, which obviously gives us repair skills, but it also gives us perfect empathic resolve, which is really, really nice. And essentially, you're just going to want skill haste and repair skills absolutely everywhere, but just be careful with the repair skills. You don't need to chunk over that too much. Having some skill haste mixed in with that as well is rather nice. But they're all the builds that I'm going to take in with me. There are a lot of other possibilities that you could. There's refactor and things like that. I know that was very popular with our escalations when that first came out. But really, I want to go with solid, true and trusted builds, which is always going to be strikers. Then we're going to go with the future initiative. And then when I showed you just before, the tank build as well. Them builds have been around for such a long time. We've had them forever. Bulwark is just really reliable. So I think going in with these, you can't really go wrong. But who knows what the new incursion will bring. But let me know what you guys are going in with down below in the comments. And as always, agents, I will see you in the next one. Bye-bye.